and welcome back to Pseudo Gameplay TV for another character analysis. Today is a very important day as it is December 23rd, which means that for those of you who have purchased the DLC expansion, we now have access to the X-Men characters. Now these are the characters that are or have been made available to us, and they appear here in the order of how you can unlock them sequentially through that expansion rift. As with the other characters, we will give them all their unique and individual character spotlights. Today's episode will focus primarily on Iceman, and on Friday, December 27th, we will then have a look at Gambit. We will have a look at Cable this coming Monday, which is December 30th, and finally, we will look at Phoenix on Friday, January 3rd. So make sure that you're subscribed to stay up to date for all of those character analysis and all my other videos as they come available, as we tend to have quite a bit of fun here on the channel. But diving right into it, let's have a look at Iceman, his origin, and his powers and abilities. So Iceman is one of the oldest characters when it comes to the introduction of the X-Men. He appeared in X-Men #1, one of the original members of the X-Men crew. Which released in September of 1963. So Iceman's been around the block, and he's been around for quite a while. His alter ego is Robert Louis Bobby Drake, which Bobby is typically how he's referred to by his closer friends. And in terms of his abilities, he's pretty straightforward, but he is very powerful and has a lot of pull in what he's capable of doing. Basically, he has ice and cold manipulation and the ability to assume an enhanced physical form that is made of ice, similar to Colossus, but it's a lot colder than steel. In terms of the attacks and abilities that Iceman has been granted here in this game, of course, being his powers based in ice, they all have something ice-related. The first one is the Arctic Blast, where he releases a bit of frigid air on the foes in front of him. And this is an attack that as you hold the button, you can continue to use it. You can also streamline that blast and manipulate it across the battlefield. The second attack, which he gains, is the Shimmering Shards, where he slams the ground with powerful fists, attacking enemies with rising blocks of ice. So that's kind of a cone-shaped area out in front of Iceman, and this has a significant amount of area of effect, at least in his immediate vicinity, and also deals some pretty good damage and knockback. His third ability is interesting because it's less of an attack as we've seen with some of the other characters, but it's actually more of an enhancement, where he covers himself and surrounding allies in an icy barrier, reducing damage done to them and granting the ability element ice to characters' attacks. And there is a particle effect that shows up, which we will showcase in the Rift as we showcase Iceman's abilities. His fourth and final ability and final attack, apart from his extreme attack, is the Ice Impact, where he drops a massive block of ice from the sky to attack the surrounding area. This does have a reticle that you can use to aim the attack as it's used, but other than that, those are the majority of the things that you would need to know about Iceman. Now, in terms of the team that we have put together for Iceman to use here, we have an interesting array, and mainly this is Iceman doesn't have very many unique abilities, so most of them are actually maxed out by having Phoenix present on the team. But the other two I've brought along because it helps to amp up some of his energy damage, so we have Spider-Man and Elsa Bloodstone present here. Now, before we jump into our 200 style Rift, let's go ahead and check into the expansion menu, how you select that, and what is needed to unlock Iceman so you can start using him. So you'll notice here that we do now have a menu select option. This is a little bit different from the previous menu option. Once you select it, you will be able to cycle through the now 3 different menus that you have access to. Of course, the main menu, the Curse of the Vampire menu, and the Rise of the Phoenix menu. Of course, since we're looking at Iceman and how we acquire him, this is the menu that we'll be having a look at. So there's a couple of interesting new game modes that have been added in with this DLC, but we're not going to focus so much on those at this point in time. If you would like to see that in a future video, let me know in the comments below, because I'd love to explore them a little bit more. But in order to view what you need to do to unlock these characters, you'll need to select this Gauntlet menu. And once you're into the Gauntlet, you will see that there are 4 different quests that you'll need to clear out. And of course, the first one, given that that's where we unlock Iceman, is going to be this one aptly named Warm Up, Cool Down. And this is a pretty straightforward quest. It wasn't too terribly difficult. It's in 3 different segments, similar to what we've seen with with the previous DLC characters and how they get unlocked. The first quest that you'll need to complete is defeating Juggernaut and Mystique. They appear, pretty much simultaneously in this quest. You have 5 minutes to defeat them. No other perks or other things that you need to be aware of when taking on this fight. The second quest is defeating Magneto, which is a little bit more tricky as the venue is the quest through Hell from the main story quest, where there's the pits of poison and other things that pop up. It's not my favorite portion of the map, but you can blitz through the first portion of it with relative ease until you get to the areas where you'll actually fight some of the characters on a little bit more even and fair ground. The important thing to remember here is you only have 120 seconds on the clock, but you can earn more time by defeating the enemies that are put in front of you. The stronger the foe, the more time you earn. And it's pretty straightforward. Magneto, as long as you've been able to beat him from some of the other rifts that you've had to do, you shouldn't really have any difficulty defeating him as long as you defeat enough enemies to increase the time that you have left to spend on it. The third and final quest that you need to do is, surprise, fighting Iceman himself. And he's a pretty straightforward fight. You do need to be careful because a part of these quests that there are danger room traps active, and in this particular quest there is a trap that causes ice rings to kind of spread out across the battle arena, and if they come in contact with you, you will be frozen in your place for a few seconds. So you can kind of roll or dodge through those, but most of your computer AI partners aren't going to do that, so there will be a time when you're just going to be fighting Iceman by yourself and trying to avoid his other attacks, which can also freeze you. But that's all that you really need to do, and you don't need to do any level up with Iceman once you unlock him, as he does come with all of his extra attacks and abilities ready for your use. But let's stop speculating and start watching how to use this character. So as a part of our analysis here, we are going to note that Iceman has a 4-hit melee attack, and the 4th and final hit of that actually has a jut of some ice energy that sends the opponent rocking backwards. His heavy attack is interesting as it has some ranged capability, which does knock down some of the smaller opponents in his area, and where he'll just kind of throw an ice shuriken, as it were, out in front of the character. Last couple things to note is his aerial attack, where he can create a couple of icicle-type projectiles as he comes down landing. And he does have a double jump, kind of. So his double jump, or the second portion of that, he will actually start creating a bit of an ice bridge and slowly gloss his way back down onto the ground. So it's not an attack that allows him to fly or stay airborne, but it does free him up from the fighting if you're needing a bit of a getaway option. So that's important to remember. In terms of his attacks, the first one that we have is the Arctic Blast, where he's just got this kind of conical or streamlined type attack. It does not, at its base power, have any freezing elements to it, but it has a decent area of effect. Doesn't do a whole lot of damage, but can kind of bust down some of the more bunched up characters that you might have. His second attack is quite more useful. It's the Shimmering Shards, and if I can showcase it here, it's kind of got a cone shape or a wave out in front of the character, and does a fair and reliable amount of damage to the opponents that it's used against. His third ability, the Fast Freeze, you do want to try and use in proximity with your teammates, as he chills the air around them, and you can see the little blue particle effect here. It assists in decreasing damage received from opponents and their attacks. So certainly a nice little bit of utility to have present on the team. His fourth and final attack is the Ice Impact, and this does leave you a little bit vulnerable on its startup, but you'll see that there's the reticle that appears here, and then there will be a giant ice block that comes careening and crashing down from the sky and crushes the enemies that are in the immediate vicinity. Now those are the terms of the attacks that he has. The most useful that you'll probably find yourself using are his Fast Freeze and his Shimmering Shards, as they have the most damage output and or utility. So just kind of keep yourself aware of those. Now his ultimate attack, he creates a little bit of an area of effect and slams down his fists in front of himself, affecting the opponents there. As you saw, there were a couple of opponents immediately behind him that remained unaffected by the scope of the attack. So try and position as many characters to your immediate front as you can to get the most amount of use out of this attack. But yeah, the attack that I find myself using the most is the Shimmering Shards and the Fast Freeze, given their utility and damage output. And he has some interesting callouts as he attacks the opponents in his immediate area. But it's quite good for bursting down some of the larger opponents and bosses. But he's a decently fun character, very highly requested, and he's one of the more popular characters among the X-Men, so that's certainly important to keep in mind as well. Well, that's really all we have for Bobby Drake or Iceman. He's a welcome addition to the game, and there's absolutely no reason to give him the cold shoulder. Pick him up, give him some use, and I'm sure you'll fall in love with him in no time. We'll be back on Friday with our next character analysis of Gambit, so make sure you're subscribed to not miss that video when it comes out. And until then, thanks again for watching, and we hope to see you in the next one. Take care.